What's up, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with Jon Impemba, managing editor of FantasyAlarm.com, and this is another edition of Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. Jon, what's going on, man? How was the weekend?
You know what? The weekend was like kind of every weekend has been for the past like 4 months, basically, until Sunday night when news just blew up everywhere with the Cam Newton signing to New England. So obviously, being a Patriots fan, living in Massachusetts, some excitement there to at least finish off the weekend. Take us into a sports week where now at least we have something new to talk about.
Absolutely, Jon. I was going to ask you, and the FA Nation wants to know, you are wearing pants right now, right, for this discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there are pants currently on me. You can't see them,
but
they're there.
Just wanted to make sure. So that is confirmed, and so is Cam Newton signing with the Patriots 1 year up to $7 million. And when you watch the Twitter universe, Jon, the first thing I got to ask you as a Patriots fan, and then we'll get into the fantasy impact, but do you think that it's even a question that'll make the team before we even go into the potential competition with Stidham? What are your thoughts regarding Cam Newton signing?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he is going to make the roster. I have to believe that there was some sort of conversation made, ahead of time where he was probably told he's going to be the starter. I guess something catastrophic happens where he either just falls apart during the preseason or Stidham really just comes into camp and is out there slinging it. So I have to believe he's going to make the team. I have to believe he's the week one starter. Basically, since Brady was rumored to be gone, there's always been that air of they're going to bring in an established veteran quarterback to at least compete with Stidham a little bit, maybe even start over him, let him learn behind it. Andy Dalton was, of course, one of those popular names that was brought in a lot. He ended up going to Dallas, and then we're like, all right, they have Hoyer. Hoyer's clearly there to be a backup, so we were led to believe, given how far we into the offseason, all right, Jarrett Stidham's the guy. You see things all over social media of Stidham holding these passing camps and all and whatnot, but here it is. Apparently this came together a couple weeks ago. They've always been apparently in some sort of conversation since he left the Panthers, since the Panthers let him go. He brought him in for a physical from what I read rumors about 2 weeks ago. So he passed the physical. They had their conversation, and here we are today. Cam Newton signing a 1-year deal.
Yes, and if you go to @FantasyAlarm on Twitter, there's actually a poll up there right now, Jon, that you put up regarding where Cam Newton could end up in the rankings for fantasy quarterbacks by the end of the season. Last I checked, Jon, the 11 through 15 area, that seemed to be most popular. Where do you think he ends up among fantasy quarterbacks?
Yeah, so I mean, I ranked him going into the year, and this is a poll or a question actually posed by James Grande last night. Of the current list of quarterbacks, where would you slot in Cam Newton as if you were drafting today? I put him at 17th overall based off the ADP that they had there. I had him one slot behind Ben Roethlisberger. I had him ahead of Ryan Tannehill. So I'm definitely tempering my expectations because we don't know what we're going to get. This guy has been injured now for basically 2 years. Didn't play last year, or played minimally last year if he played at all. Actually, I have to forget if he actually played a game or not for them. And we've seen mixed results. He's never been an efficient passer. In the system, his fantasy ability has always been tied to his running ability. So, what are we going to do with him? So I'm tentatively putting him there at 17, but obviously he has the upside of a top 5 quarterback, like if he gets it going under Belichick, if they form the right system around him, he could be a top 10 QB come season end. I think where everybody has him in the poll right now, 11 to 15 as the 53% edge right now, I think that's fair. If you're in a 12-team league, you put him as your back-end QB1. I think that's totally fair.
Let's talk about some of his options now because we do have our living draft guide available for you, fantasyalarm.com/NFL draft guide, 50% off $19.97. You get not only our football content in the draft guide and rankings and tiers, sleepers, busts, but you also get our fantasy baseball content as well from the Jim Bowden MLB draft guide. So, Jon, I guess the first name that comes to mind when thinking of the Cam Newton signing is, how does this bump up Julian Edelman's fantasy value?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think it gets any worse. I understand that Newton isn't an accurate passer, and he's, not one that always had a lot of touch. Like, he was a decent deep ball thrower. Edelman doesn't really run those routes. He's more of the intermediate route. But we saw Steve Smith, Colorado roll, doing those exact same things. So, maybe Edelman should be fine. I've been taking Edelman in the 8th round in these best ball drafts that I've been doing, and that was under the assumption of Stidham. I have to believe that he may get bumped up a little bit, maybe a round and a half. Get him in the late sixth, maybe somewhere in the seventh right now, because by all accounts, many people assume Newton is an upgrade over what Stidham is. So I'm liking a lot of Edelman. If we're talking about deep balls, this should bode well for N'Keal Harry. Now, again, who knows how that arm's going to react after the shoulder surgery that he went through a couple years ago, if he has the arm strength there to be able to make those deep balls. But, those plays should be there for Harry to kind of develop, a guy that can throw the ball deep, unlike Brady. So maybe there's some more upside there. Harry's basically going, final 2 picks in best ball to this point right now. So, there's definitely going to be a little bit of an increase in value there. But pass catching wise, there's not really much else in New England. There's Mohamed Sanu, who's going undrafted largely. Right. Maybe he could get a little bit of a bump because he's a veteran. I think James White probably gets the biggest bump because we know that there's going to be a lot of checkdowns. We saw how Newton worked with Christian McCaffrey. Now, White's obviously not Christian McCaffrey, but in terms of being able to catch the football out of the backfield, White's one of the best running backs in football at that. So I'd give a little bit of a bump to Edelman, a little bit of a bump to James White. Harry probably stays where he is. Sanu maybe becomes more of a late round flyer than an undrafted player if you're really looking to go that route.
Does it make you a little bit turned off by Sony Michel at all? Now, we already have reasons to be turned off by him because of the foot, but even with Cam Newton and his mobility, do you think that maybe takes down Michel just a little bit? Because that's someone that if you're looking for running backs and you're not looking to pay a pretty penny, that's a guy that's going to be there and you won't have to pay starter's price.
Yeah, what kills me the most with Michel is that once they get in the red zone, it's now Cam Newton territory.
Right.
Before, you could count maybe to get in the red zone, they're going to run the ball, Michel or whoever running back they put back there. Historically speaking, the idea with Cam Newton is you get him in the red zone, you kind of spread teams out a little bit, and you let either Cam pass or run. You do the RPO. So I have to assume that's going to kill a lot of Michel's touchdown upside. Not many people were really high on him to begin with. He's already coming off that foot surgery that had him dropping in ADPs. He's probably a full avoid for me now at this point. I did actually get him in our auction draft for $3 that you and I partook in on Saturday. Thankfully I didn't break the bank there, but I'm definitely a little bit less excited about those prospects now.
Yep. Want to remind everybody, it is a living draft guide that we have on the site, meaning everything gets changed. It's not like old school back in the day. You have your magazine. That's it. That's what you get.
His projections were updated immediately yesterday. So
that's what the family brings. That's why we're all family here. And that's what families do. They defend each other. And we're going to make winners out of all of you as being part of the hashtag FA family, capital FA there. John, you mentioned the auction. Let's talk about the auction that we had with some of the family and RT Sports on Saturday. You, me, James Grande, Dan Mellon was kind of in there. So we're going to talk about auction strategies. This was something that we've wanted to talk about for a while. I'm someone that prefers auctions to snake drafts. Where do you stand? What do you prefer?
So, I definitely like auctions. It's the time commitment that it takes. And I find that, it just takes a lot more, and there's a lot more strategy, I think, that goes into auctions than snake, where you can sort of pivot, your snake draft strategy middle of the draft really to depending on which kind of the way the draft is going. But if you're in an auction draft and all of a sudden guys are starting to go for high prices, or players you want are starting to be tossed up for auction early, you may overspend and then not have enough money at the end. And you really have to be committed to your auction draft strategy, set hard price points on players, don't go over those, and really manage your cap and your budget. So I like the strategy behind auctions. I usually do 1 or 2 a year, but primarily I'm a snake draft guy.
I hear you. See, I'm the other way. I'm an auction guy, and one of the biggest critiques is it takes too long. Well, you know what? Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to have more control in your own destiny, and that's what it is. If you really want to go in on a $200 budget, let's just say, you really want to go in on 2 potential first-round picks, you can. That's the beauty of an auction. You want to go in on a guy like McCaffrey and then maybe even someone like a Michael Thomas. Yes, like John was saying, you're not going to have too much money to spend. But that's the thing, John. Dollar days in fantasy football, you can still find valuable receivers and especially tight ends and quarterbacks as well. That's why I really don't mind spending up on some of those players. So, John, let's go over some strategies here when it comes to auctions. Here's the first thing when it comes to an auction, unlike a snake draft. Rule number one, I'm going to give you 2 rules, John, and I'm going to let you comment on them. Rule number one, if you're in an auction draft, you have to show up to the auction.
Yeah.
Okay. Rule number 2, you have to show up to the auction. You just have to. It's not like pre-ranked players when it comes to drafts and stake drafts, then it's fine. Auctions, it ruins the entire auction. It really does. I haven't found a site yet that has figured out how exactly, if you put in a certain dollar amount for players, how it sticks to that and doesn't auto auction. John, it's a total nightmare. And that's why you have to make sure everybody is in the auction. If you can't be in there, something happens, you have to find a proxy.
Yeah, I'll call him out because we're talking about Dan Malin, who did not show up to Saturday's best ball auction draft. Now, he did have, good enough circumstances. Car broke down. That happens to all of us. It was more frustrating with the way that the auto draft worked because, it would basically, whatever player was nominated, the auto draft would just auto bid it up until whatever the site's designated price point was on that player. So it was impossible for the most part to get value, but not for all players. Like, it was completely up to with how the site got these guys. So you had some players going way under value. You had random points where the computer would auto throw in a bid randomly in the middle of a bidding war. So it was a little frustrating for sure, trying to get a team done and having to spend max money on guys that you were hoping to get on the cheap because, the auction team was the one that had the most money available, basically all draft and finish with $22 on the board. So even if you thought you could get a dollar player like I did with Golden Tate, and the auction, they valued him up to like $3, so I couldn't even steal Golden Tate for $1. That gets a little frustrating. Again, not totally his fault. These circumstances happen, but for the most part, you definitely, when you're setting your, maybe your seasonal league drafts and not just one of these best balls, you want everybody there for sure.
Yes, and it's not even a want. It's a need. Yeah. You need everybody there because here's what's going to happen. Let's just use a site like Yahoo, for instance. Here's what's going to happen. That auto auctioneer or that auto auction person, the person that is not there, they're going to go in. It's going to be auto bidding for the first about 5-6 players. They're going to bid as high as they want. Then they'll be in dollar days. But the problem with that is if there's someone that you want, the price point is going to be astronomically higher. And that's a big problem. Again, I've seen it so many times before, and it's been delayed when someone hasn't shown up for whatever the circumstance is. It happens every single time. I wish there was a better system, John. There just isn't, and we experienced that on Saturday.
Yep, no, it's true. I mean, that's just kind of the facts of it, unfortunately. So, again, hopefully it's not something that you guys will be out there dealing with, right? You'll be kind of all together.
No, you have to. And again, that's the beauty of an auction. It's so much fun. For those that haven't played in an auction before, like I said, more control over your team's destiny. Let's go over some strategies, though. Let's start with bidding because it's not like a snake draft. We're putting it in order to just nominate players. So, John, I'm going to tell you one of my strategies and that I employed early on. If you
caught a lot of flack for it.
Yes, I did. I did catch a lot of flack. But, I was called soft by our guy, the Kangas man, because the first person I put out was actually not a player. It was a team defense. I believe it was the 49ers defense that I put out there first. Why? Because I want to get money off the board right away. Yep. Everybody is so eager to hit the bid button. And I know everybody's chomping at the bit to do so. So I am going to throw a curveball right away to get people spending money. Where if I can get $5 to $7 off the board on a team defense, why not? That's less competition for me in players that I want. Let's get the money off the board. But however, FA Nation did a very good job of holding pat when it came to that. When I put the defense in, went for about $3 or $4, and that's it. And I even wrote in the comment section, I applauded FA Nation for holding steady in that regard, John.
Still too much money to put on a defense. Save the $2.
Right.
Do $1 defense. That's all you need.
John, I've seen the bidding go up to close to $10 on team defenses. We had kickers in this as well. And of course, I'm going to do that. I want to get people spending money so I have less competition down the road. That's the whole point of it, John. What are your strategies early on in the auction when it comes to nominating players?
I mean, I'm sort of the same way. I like to go ahead and nominate guys where I think a lot of people will spend money on, where the helium is, like we like to talk about. You throw a Hayden Hurst out there where a lot of people are buying in on the Hayden Hurst hype. So maybe you hope you get somebody to go ahead and overspend on a guy like that. And then, he only went for $6 in this draft, comparatively, though, I mean, other guys, Evan Ingram, Mark Andrews, they went for 11 and 7. Guys like that. Gesicki also went for 11. So I thought maybe we'd get a little bit more money spent on a guy like Hayden Hurst. Darren Waller only went for 8. So I know you and I have talked about, early this year about getting guys to spend a lot more money on tight end dollars because we feel the class is pretty deep. So I mean, I feel like trying to go ahead and getting guys to spend on those type of positions that I don't necessarily value as much. Like you said, a defense for me, it was tight end. I was more than okay with getting my dollar tight ends at the end. So if I get guys to spend $10+ on players, then I'm all for it. Another strategy that I have is throwing out guys handcuffs once a player has been drafted to see if that owner who has them will be willing to spend a little bit more money to get him. You can kind of bid him up. We did that with Kangas, man. He spent the money on Dalvin Cook, and we made him bid up Alexander Madison up to $11. Now, again, not terrible for your backup, but the clock was counting down. He was only going to get him for 3, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and hit a button to 4. And then he had to get him for 5, and then someone else chimed in for 6. And next thing you know, he's spending $63 on the Vikings backfield, whether it's Cook or Madison. Madison could be a complete waste if Dalvin Cook ends up playing the season and he spent $11 on a player he didn't necessarily need there. So my goals there are certainly to get guys to spend money where they don't want. I bid up guys where I think there's a lot of helium, a Deontay Johnson, a Hayden Hurst. Mike Gesicki even went for 11, like I mentioned before, or guys that I don't necessarily like. I'll go ahead and throw them out there either and hope I can get people just to throw money down. So, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's everybody's waiting for somebody else to hit the bid button and it never happens. And someone's like, dang, he got X player for $5. Where was that one? So It plays both ways.
Right. It does. And so I'm just going to give you my strategy. I hide nothing from you. When you win, I win. That's how it works. You can use my own strategies against me if you want. I'll applaud you for that because there's more than one strategy when it comes to the auctions, clearly. But I'll start by going after a top defense or two. Then maybe a top kicker. And a lot of my leagues don't have defense or kicker anymore. It's almost like a thing of the past, kind of like waiver priority versus fab. But then my first player I will always nominate, Travis Kelce. It's going to happen. And in this particular auction, no one was tapping tight ends early, John. Right. So I said, okay, I'm going to be that guy. So I got Travis Kelce on the board, and listen, we all know Travis Kelce, good for 1,200 yards, the best tight end. We get that. But I got $31 spent on him in this 10-team auction, and I loved every second of it, John.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of money. I was actually in the bidding on there, not to acquire him, but also, again, to push up prices, because that is a little bit of a strategy that I like to employ as well.
A little bit of a strategy. You were like double A.R. Anderson. You were the enforcer of the entire auction. About bullying. You were such a bully during that auction. I was shocked. That's so not like you personality-wise. You're calm. You're serene. You're a nice guy, Jon Impemba. Looking at you, you're like a big old teddy bear. And then you get into these auctions, and you're bidding everybody up.
Well, it's part of the strategy. And the key is not to get caught, Again, going back to our boy Kangas, man, he admittedly got caught pricing up George Kittle, spent $25 on him, right? Ended up having to eat that. I got caught with David Montgomery. Again, I was trying to price him up a little bit. Bidding stopped. I got stuck with him at $15. So do I like David Montgomery? I'm hopeful. He burned me last year. I'm hoping that Nagy figures out how to use him and I get a little bit more value. But, Montgomery for 15 wasn't necessarily a guy I was looking to target. I was just hoping maybe to get another dollar out of somebody. So there's always, of course, risk with those things. But, I mean, yeah, if I can go ahead and I think a guy is certainly in on somebody, I'll pump the dollars. That's totally fine with me.
Yes, and like John said, though, you have to be careful. You don't want to get caught every single time. And you also want to try to fly under the radar a little bit because you don't want people to start marking you down that you're the guy, you're the enforcer that's going to bid up. John, I knew what you were doing immediately, and I grabbed my popcorn, and I was loving every second of it because people kept taking the bait. And I'm not going to be someone that just writes in the comments section, watch out for Impemba. He's going to bid up everyone. No, I'm going to let you play your game. However, if you are in a redraft with me moving forward, John, I'm going to call you out for it. So you got to be careful, and you can't do that with every player. But just to tell you guys what kind of value certain positions have. I mean, looking at the tight ends, Gronk went for $2. I got Higbee for $4, Kelsey 31, Waller 8. Andrews 11, and it's all across the board. That's why you shouldn't fear spending up big on multiple players. If you want to spend big on multiple running backs, you can find those wide receivers later. I got Robert Woods for $12. Yeah. And this was a guy that goes in what, John, the third round I've seen in some leagues?
Yeah, it was crazy. This was my first auction of the year, so I was definitely a little bit rusty. I wasn't rusty out of the gate. I had my man set. I wanted Christian McCaffrey. I spent the money, $69. More than willing to go ahead and spend that money on him. That's usually the strategy that I go in. I spend up big on the one guy at the top because to me, the foundation of teams is the elite running backs, especially this year more than ever when we don't know what's going on. So I was more than willing to drop that kind of money. Saquon actually went for $2 more than McCaffrey in this draft. We were able to bid up Elliott. I was going back and forth with Grande. He got up to $64 there. So the top three running backs all went for a pretty penny there. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of good value, and a strategy that I sometimes will employ is waiting to the end to sort of spend a lot of my money, and I'll throw out junk players that I have no interest in. Because if you look at the later second half of this draft, when a lot of guys really weren't able to bid, like you said, there's a lot of guys that got a lot of good value there. I mean, Calvin Ridley went for $13. A lot of people are high on him. Amari Cooper at $13. You mentioned that you got what was that there?
Robert Woods.
For 11 or 12. Juju Smith-Schuster only went for 6. So there was a lot of good value at these wide receivers that went off the board. Adam Thielen for $13, Cooper Kupp for $14. So and these are guys that were brought up later in the draft where guys had already spent their money and they couldn't really afford to price up more. So it's certainly a strategy to behold. Again, something that I typically do. I find myself doing that a lot in baseball drafts. Football is a slightly different animal, but as this draft was playing out and I was looking at the guys still available on the board, I'm like, I kind of wish I had, an extra $40 available to go ahead and get some good value here. So, good first auction to get out of the way. I'll probably do a couple more and fine tune the strategy a little bit as we go.
Yes. Now, my advice, and this is what I do, because you have to keep yourself in check sometimes. You can't be bidding for every single player because, like John said, if you're going to try to be an enforcer, you're going to get caught. For me, here's what I do. Before the draft, I write a list of 15 active targets for players, 15. And I write a dollar value amount that I think is great. And then what I do from there is, especially with the top 10, let's just say, I add a +5 valuation to that. That way, it allows me to spend on who I want and know that I'm going to be okay later on. Because like I said, and like John, you were going through some of the values, you can find those low-end wide receiver twos. And
A.J. Brown for $9.
Yeah.
$9 A.J. Brown. So.
These are amazing values. So get the guys that you want. Don't be afraid. For me, I got Alvin Kamara. I was very happy with that. Alvin Kamara for $53 compared to, look, in some drafts, he's going, 5-6 picks after McCaffrey? That's a decent value right there. I got running backs like James Conner, who I've seen go in the third, fourth round for $18. Yeah. Cam Akers, $16.
That was, you got that one right off the bat, and I was like, wow. Cam Akers only went for $16. That was one of the best overall values, I think. Potentially, again, we'll find out at the end of the year, but on the surface, looking at it right now, I thought that was one of the best values on the board.
Thank you very much, John. I don't know if you're setting me up for a mousetrap or not, but
I'm not. No mousetraps. I'll also say again, I won't mention where we did this draft, but there was also a little bit of funkiness going on with the draft system. There were a lot of times where many of us were hitting the bid buttons and bids weren't being put through. There was 2 instances where I didn't even see a player get put up for auction, and then they got sold. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what just happened? How did Josh Allen go for $2? What happened? I didn't even see that player go for bid. You know, like Josh Allen is worth more than $2, you know, in a best ball league. So again, you know, I won't call out the site we used. There was just a little bit of funkiness going on in this draft. It certainly helped some people get some better values than maybe they were worth. I know James Grande has a little bit of a gripe. He bought Matt Ryan for 8, and then immediately the next pick he somehow bid $15 for Russell Wilson. I never even saw the bid go up that high for Russell Wilson. He claims he didn't even place a bid to begin with. So he spent back-to-back picks, Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson. Not, again, for a best ball draft, not awful. Like, getting Wilson for 15 and Ryan for 8 is a pretty good, you know, number there, because I thought Ryan was actually a little bit too cheap for what he went for.
If that happened in redraft, and I'm sure he would hate himself more, I would hate myself.
In redraft, for sure.
That is terrible for me, because as someone who is more of a dollar value guy when it comes to quarterbacks anyway. I mean,
I spent $3 on 3 quarterbacks.
Right.
Baseball, so.
Right. And Grande, because of what happened, spent $23 on 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing, is just making sure that if you have certain players you want, allow yourself to go after them. But then at some point, you want to make sure your max bid stays high enough so that when later on a guy like Calvin Ridley comes up, you can put a high max bid on them. That's how it works. So you can't just go spend. Okay, I'm in dollar days. Great. I guess you can do that, but you shouldn't do that. But spend up on a few of those players, add a +5. That's what I do. And then get the players you want. That's the beauty of the auction, John.
Yeah, I'm 1,000% with you. Like I said, I started off getting the guys that I had targeted. I overspent a little bit, and I got caught again, not necessarily pricing up, because I did like Mike Evans, but I got caught spending a little bit more than what I probably ended up wanting to. You know, I got Kenny Golladay for $24, which I think is fine, but I got $27 on Mike Evans, not really what I was looking to do. So something I would certainly change a little bit there, especially when you see guys like Allen Robinson went for $23. I'd rather him over Mike Evans. He said Juju went for 16. Odell Beckham went for 24. So all those guys I like probably a little bit more than Mike Evans, and I spend more on Evans there. So I agree with you. You just got to kind of refine your strategy, set hard prices. You know, we have an article I wrote last week about drafting in tiers. Doesn't necessarily mean just for, you know, snake drafts. Set your tiers for auction, set hard price points, and stick to it, and you can create a really strong draft formula.
Right. Now, something else I want to talk about, and this happened a couple of times in our auction. Don't leave money on the board.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, don't do that. You're carrying it over? You're not. That money, you might as well throw it out on the highway. Spend all of your money. Why did someone leave $16 on the board? I don't understand that. You want to spend all your money. I know I just said you don't want to immediately be in dollar days, but what good is it? What, so you can say to everybody, I got my team, and I didn't even have to spend all my budget. Who cares? It's about winning. Use that money.
He annoyed me a little bit, because I thought I could get Matt Stafford for a little bit cheap, and the next thing you know, he bid $12 on him. So his name was Detroit Breakdown. I didn't read the team name before, you know, throwing his name out there, thinking maybe I could get him for a little cheap, because especially since he already spent money on Kyler Murray, I didn't think he would go ahead and bid that much up on Stafford. But you're right, he left $16 on the table. He had an interesting draft, though, because he, in my opinion, you know, $46 and $41 on Miles Sanders. You know, given the fact that, you know, Dalvin Cook went for 52, and you look at some of the other guys, you know, Nick Chubb went for 38, Kenny Drake went for 38, Henry went for 30, Kamara went for 53, which, you know, good buy there. And you see 46 for Mixon and 41 for Sanders. You kind of think maybe he overspent a little bit there.
Yeah, and that's where you have to be careful, and you have to know in this particular league, and this is where it's crucial to know this. There's a difference, and a huge difference if your league is 2 wide receivers starting versus 3. So for me, I was like, okay, it's 2 wide receivers starting, so now I can spend comfortably in the 30s on some of the top tier guys. I ended up getting Julio Jones for 36, Godwin for 33, and I was happy as hell. Because, again, it is best ball, but I didn't have to worry about that 3rd wide receiver. It's a little bit different. Right. Normally, in a 3 wide receiver start league, I am looking for that 3rd receiver to spend about $15 on that receiver. And for me, if that was the case, I could have gotten someone, if we were going based off these prices, someone like Adam Thielen. But that's where you also have to remember that if it's a starting position, even though you do have a flex, that receiver is likely to be more wanted in 3 wide receiver starts.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to be thrilled getting Julio at 36, given the bidding war you had with Grande over Devontae Adams, who went for 40.
Oh, I was so pissed at him. I wanted Devontae Adams, and we were side chatting too, and we were yelling at each other. I'm like, dude, get out of my ozone, please,
Yeah.
seriously.
So but you cut the cord, you let him take it, and then you got a guy that could conceivably finish ahead of Devontae Adams and Julio Jones in the rankings for $10 less. So, I think that was a great buy as well.
Yes, I don't want to get into bidding wars with people. I don't. I know when I'm going to bid someone up, and this is also something very important too. If you're in a league with friends, and we don't really know each other too much in this league. I mean, John, you and I know each other, so I knew you were going to be in on every single Patriots player, which you pretty much were. And you kind of were. Even Edelman, I was laughing at a few of your bids with Grande, but I don't know Grande style, and everybody else in there I really did not know. So if you're in a league and with friends, a home league, here's what you need to do. You need to have some kind of piece of paper, and you need to start almost interviewing your friends, asking them what players they like. That way, you can take advantage of them in the auction. That's doing your homework. That's knowing your opponent. That's being a coach. That's being a champion, John. And for this league, it was a little bit more difficult because we didn't know each other, but a lot of people play in home leagues. And you know that when I launch my home auction in just a few days so I can get everything organized, I'm going to start asking people, so who are you high on? You like Miles Sanders? How much do you like Miles Sanders? Write that down. Write it down again. Leave a note in your phone. That is part of the game. You got to play mind games. You got to get your mind right to get your grind right, John.
Yeah, I agree with you there. My biggest problem here was everybody knows how much I like Odell Beckham, so I couldn't get him for any cheaper than he went for. So, and even $24, was I kind of put myself in a little bit of a pickle given my salary situation there. But people knew I was high on him, so people would not let me get him.
Right. No, absolutely. And again, you can find that value later on. Don't worry. Don't see like, oh, I have to make sure I have a certain dollar amount. That's not how it works. Right. You can get value for $1. There are a lot of dollar value players you can get. For example, I got Alan Lazard for $1. People are talking about how there's no one else in Green Bay. Well, I got Alan Lazard for $1. I'm cool with that. Cobb for $1. I got Hyde for $1, Dillon for $1. There's a lot of value there. That's where I think auctions, it gives you a real look as to how players are valued. Where in snake drafts, you can have position runs. In auctions, you can see just how big the player pool is. So It allows you to spend up big early on. Because, John, we could say this and we can end this with this. I am not someone, and I've been burned so many times earlier in my fantasy career with this. I don't care about the whole having the hammer. I'm not into that. I don't want to just be the guy that sits there waiting for the first hour of the auction just because you get caught up, especially with the running back position. It's burned me so many times that I'm not like that. My guy comes up that I want, that I have written down on my tiers list. I am going after that player. I don't think it's smart to just hold all your money for the first hour because here's why, John. You can give me your opinion on this. If you're doing that, I'm going to make sure that I notice it, and I'll notice it very quickly because I try to think of myself as perceptive somewhat. Yeah. So if I notice that you're doing that, you're holding your money, I'm going to make sure I have a high max bid so I can start almost maxing you out of players to get you to spend money off the board.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I was noticing that as well as we were going through guys who still had, $120 of the $200 budget and were, pretty deep into it. I'm like, all right, well, this guy's clearly waiting because he knows that there's going to be some value available to him later on, and sometimes you catch it a little bit too late and you're already spent your, $150 and you're like, well, I got 15 positions left and I got an average bid of 4, So, it depends on the strategy, but you definitely got to be aware of that and understand like, oh man, this person could be set up if we don't start, throwing those names out there earlier because, if you try to be sneaky with some guys and you don't get them bid up early enough, then you're going to give away some good players to your league.
I don't care about having the hammer. I don't think it puts you in an advantageous spot because, again, you're going to have multiple people maxing you up. They want you to spend the money. You're going to become a target. So don't just do it. It's one thing if you have a group of guys that you want and they haven't been brought up yet, that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. But in an hour, one of those players is very likely to be brought up in a fantasy football auction. So don't just wait just to wait. It's going to burn you, and then you're going to be left with money on the table, and you're going to be kicking yourself after that. He's Jon Impemba. I'm Justin Fensterman. This is Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. We always dominate. Why? Because there is no other option.